Music Room. I'm Duncan Taylor, and we're back in the listening lab to talk a little bit more about network streaming. But specifically today, we're talking about noise and the act of fine-tuning a digital streaming setup, or as some like to call it, good old-fashioned hi-fi tweaking. Now, there are a lot of ways to tweak your system and a lot of improvements you can make to any system, but in a digital streaming rig, a lot of the tweaks, if you think about it, have everything to do with, in some way or another, the elimination of noise. Spikes focus vibrational noise to a point. Fuses can have an impact on power line noise. Power conditioners, cable lifters, shields, and grounding boxes, and more, all aim to fight their own type of noise in their own specific way. Well, here's another one to add to that list, and that's noise on the Ethernet line. Now, I'm one of those audiophiles that believes that everything matters in a serious hi-fi system. In my system at home, just for power conditioning, I use a power regenerator, a power conditioner, linear power supplies, handfuls of these parallel line filters, aftermarket power cables, and various vibrational dampening elements, and that's just for power. But I also recently discovered that I had another noise blind spot in my system, and that was on the Ethernet source, on my audio coming into my DAC along the Ethernet line. And of course, it makes sense. In a digital streaming network system, it is the furthest up the chain. The whole system builds upon what it presents. There are a growing number of tweaks people are using to get better sound at this point of the system chain. Galvanic isolation can separate the ground line noise from the ground going forward by converting signals to optical and back to Ethernet. Aftermarket Ethernet cables are a hot item for network tweakers as well. Silver wire and Cat8 specs are what you'll find on these pricey upgrades, and users report various sonic differences between brands and styles of this type of upgrade. But perhaps the fastest growing area of network tweaking right now is the use of audiophile grade network switches. Now at the Music Room, we're dealers for many brands of new equipment, as well as, of course, our used catalog. But it's our pals at Nordost whom I think have come up with the best tweak in this category, and that is the QNet audiophile network switch. The QNet's job is to provide noise filtering and better clocking for the Ethernet signal. Everything about this thing is designed with audio in mind. The ports on the back are spaced out and isolated to provide better crosstalk reduction, and 2 port speeds are offered, gigabit out of the first 3 and 100 megabit out of the final 2 ports. The slower speed is more than enough for transmission of high-resolution audio files, but allows for better noise reduction in the Nordost QNet circuitry. It comes with its own DC power supply, a wall wart, which is a switch mode power supply. But if I've learned anything about network audio and the way to tweak it is the closer you get to the server, the more important power supply is, and the more beneficial a linear power supply in this position can be. Now, this isn't news to Nordost at all, because they've designed their own power supply, a linear power supply they call the QSource, to work with the QNet for maximum effect. I did listen to the QNet with and without the linear power supply, and there's no mistaking the upgrade that the linear power supply provides. I just couldn't stop shaking my head at the profound and meaningful difference that the LPS-powered QNet made in my system. I've been hanging on to these in my own system, and while they don't yet belong to me, it's going to be one of those things that I'm going to have to rearrange my upgrade plans and budget and make it happen. So the good question, though, is what does the sound of removal of Ethernet noise produce? What does it sound like in a system when you bring the noise down? Well, the further you get into this hobby and the more exposure you have to different types of tweaks that have to do with noise removal, the better sense you start to get over what can happen when noise is removed from a system. And in most cases, it just comes down to one word: realism. Instruments are never more real than after you remove this veil of noise. Details in the soundstage are just more lifelike. And so that's essentially what you get from this QNet and its noise reduction on the Ethernet. Plenty of components in modern digital equipment can produce small currents of noise, and this includes the common internet modem. It's clear as day when you use this noise-removing network switch that the Ethernet line, in my case, the source of all of my music, needs a cleanup. We've got our linear power supply and we've got our network switch, but I can't help but notice all the extra unused rails of clean DC power coming out of the QSource. So I started looking into, well, what else can I power with this? And of course, Nordost produces a wonderful little component that looks like a little UFO called the QPoint. Now, this is what Nordost calls a resonance synchronizer. So the theory goes that each component inside a device, resistors, capacitors, inductors, all those different little pieces, each have their own resonances, and these resonances are not aligned. They're all defined by the size and shape and the position of these components. So what Nordost has done in their R&D is attempted to blanket a whole component or areas of the PCB with the same resonance, and by that they will align the resonances of these devices, thereby making the audio quality better. The QPoint comes with two different resonant modes, and in my testing I could not only clearly hear the effect of the QPoint, but I could also clearly hear the differences between the modes. Most of the reviews I've seen out there for the QPoint mention that the reviewer preferred the blue mode, and while I also did at first, I found that over time I grew to appreciate the 3D aspect of the green mode more than the wide bandwidth cleanliness of the blue. One of my first questions about the QPoint was how it projects a resonance through a component's chassis, which is essentially a Faraday cage. I don't know the answer to this question, and Nordost honestly doesn't need to answer that if it gives away the magic recipe. I just know that this thing works, and it was a fantastic add-on to the QNet switch and QSource power supply combo. In my system, I'm planning to add more of these as my budget allows. I really enjoy these tweaks and the way that they took my system to a completely new level. Now, this is not an inexpensive tweak by any means, but it does represent about the same amount that I've spent on my power conditioning, and in my system the results are just about the same, which is to say substantial. It made a huge improvement to my streaming digital rig, and I highly recommend this product to any audiophiles that are trying to build the best digital streaming setup possible. Well, thanks for watching this video. From everyone at the Music Room, I'm Duncan Taylor, wishing you happy listening, and we'll catch you on the next video.